Tonight, she's Canada's first Indigenous dean of a law school, but now has a lawsuit against her former employer.
Because of those unique things about the meth use itself, that's what to me necessitates a specific response.
Lumping Manitoba's meth crisis into all other addiction issues brings criticism from the provincial NDP.
It's a huge community that Isabel built up, and a lot of people do support her.
And she suffered a debilitating injury, but now is a rising star on the ice. Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgeon. A Dakota Access Pipeline protester who nearly lost her arm during an incident 2 years ago is suing law enforcement officials. Sophia Wolanski was handing out water bottles to protesters on the Backwater Bridge when she was hit by what her family has called an explosive munition. Law enforcement have referred to the munitions as less than lethal. Wolanski needed numerous surgeries following the incident that is said to have destroyed almost all of the arteries, skin, tissue, muscle, nerves, tendons, and bone in her left forearm. She is one of dozens of protesters that was injured that night. Morton County and several law enforcement officials are named in the federal lawsuit.
Over on the East Coast, a group of mainly Mi'kmaq people took over the Canso Causeway. Their aim was to shine a light on the recent death of Cassidy Bernard. She was found dead in her home a month ago. We have this report from our colleagues with Atlantic Television.
They came from every Mi'kmaq community on Cape Breton and several on the mainland. Hundreds holding signs and a mass showing of public support for a family that until now has been grieving privately.
She was so full of life. She lived every day to the fullest. There was nothing more pleasing to her than being a mother of identical twins. It was just so sad that her life ended this way.
It was on October 24th that 22-year-old Cassidy Bernard, a new mother of infant twin girls, was found dead inside her home on Wagimaw First Nation. The babies found inside too, unharmed. Family members today describing a horrible scene, one that has shaken the community to its core.
The whole community is still in shock. We're still grieving, and we're still looking for answers. So, you know, it's it won't get better until we have closure.
Today's red dress march across the causeway, a call for answers in Cassidy's death, who they believe was murdered. They are calling for justice.
We're done asking for it. We've asked too much. We've asked too many times. They're not listening to us, and our women are being killed every day. We are demanding it. No longer asking. We're demanding it.
The RCMP remained tight-lipped about what happened to Cassidy Bernard, only calling her death suspicious, saying their investigation is continuing, but no arrests have been made. Meanwhile, the chief and counsel is offering a $100,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest and conviction in Cassidy's death.
We're willing to do whatever it takes to solve this case.
A call for justice and cry for help for a young woman taken too soon. Kyle Moore, CTV News, Port Hastings, Nova Scotia.
The former dean of a law school in Thunder Bay is suing the institution for racial discrimination. Angelique Eaglewoman announced her departure from Lakehead University's Bora-Laskin Faculty of Law in April of this year. Eaglewoman says she faced, quote, systemic discrimination and a hostile work environment. There was great fanfare when Eaglewoman was announced as Canada's first Indigenous law dean in 2016, but she says it was a difficult 2 years marred by a, quote, toxic work environment, lack of resources, and demeaning and paternalistic micromanagement by the university's senior administration. The lawsuit seeks damages of $2.6 million. Lakehead University says it does not comment on any litigation or personnel matters. None of the allegations in the statement of claim have been tested in court. You can find more on this story on our website, aptnnews.ca.
The Mohawk Council of Ganawage is strongly opposed to Bill S3 and Canada's consultations on Indian registration. Bill S3, an act to amend the Indian Act, will see the federal government create new status Indians once the legislation passes. According to the community's research, at least 35,000 potential new registrants will be tied to the Mohawks of Kahnawake. In a recent letter to the Prime Minister and Crown Indigenous Relations Minister, Grand Chief Joe Norton outlines the challenges an influx would create for the community. He says that no nation is entitled to impose criteria for belonging to another nation.
It's not just us, it's right across the country. And everybody across the country should be aware of that and should be concerned that, you're doing all kinds of initiatives today, with language and culture, but at the same time, somewhere in the future, you'll have many people coming into your communities that do not understand the language, have no idea what the culture is, has never struggled at any time with the kinds of issues that we have. But yet, these people will be allowed to benefit from all of the things that we benefit from right now.
This week, the Manitoba government delivered its speech from the throne outlining what the province is focusing on for the next year. Notably, Premier Brian Pallister failed to put forth a plan to combat the growing use of meth.
We have to understand also that for some addicts or users, obviously they switch, from one substance to another.
Pallister told reporters the government needs to look at the broader impacts of drug addiction instead of focusing on meth alone. In Manitoba, people seeking treatment for meth addiction has gone up by 100%, according to the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba. Many groups have called on the government to address the issue. Manitoba NDP leader Wab Canoe says a meth-specific plan needs to be created in order to deal with the crisis.
The situation's got so bad with meth because it has these unique characteristics. There's no chemical substitute that a doctor can prescribe, like there's no methadone for meth, right? Also, it leads to way more violence than other drugs. So because of those unique things about the meth use itself, that's what to me necessitates a specific response. That's why you need to have a meth-specific strategy, because the drug is unique and it does create these different situations for the people who are addicted to it.
On its second day of hearings in Kuujjuaq, Nunavik, the Quebec inquiry heard from the Department of Youth Protection. The DYP, as they're known in Quebec, have been the subject of several unflattering testimonies from Inuit. Tom Fenario has the story.
Hi! The statistics are alarming. 2017 to present, 1 out of 3 Inuit youth in Nunavik was reported to youth protection.
Actuellement, les intervenants de notre côté à l'application des mesures ont une charge de cas en moyenne de 45 dossiers. La moyenne provinciale devrait être autour de 18 dossiers par intervenant. Donc, évidemment qu'il y a des enjeux sur la qualité des services.
The co-directors of Youth Protection for Nunavik, along with support staff, testified for almost 4 hours. Known in Quebec as the DYP, they outline challenges they say they face when trying to keep up with a caseload that grows every single year. Among their concerns, they listed retention of employees who only last on average 1.5 years, recruitment of more Inuit employees for translation and social work, and inadequate remuneration for Inuit foster families who currently receive $40 a day. Nunavik's Health Board says it's currently in negotiations with Quebec to up the amount to $80 a day.
You need to have at least, you say, $100 per day in order to have a value which is more realistic regarding costs here. Is this what I understood? For sure, if we can be more attracting, more people will accept easier to receive a child.
In 2007, Quebec's Human Rights Commission made a damning report regarding youth protection in the Nunavik region. Since then, the DYP says they've worked to minimize taking kids away from their parents. But when it does happen, they say they've done better at keeping them with extended or Inuit foster families.
As a parent, I think that for children, the best place for them is in their families. But at the end of the line, when we have to remove a child, it is a question of safety, generally speaking. And if we don't have collaboration on the parents' end, then we don't have a choice but to act.
Despite the DYP's claims of progress, prosecutors for the inquiry pointed out a recent coroner's report regarding the 2018 case of an adolescent Inuit girl in Saluit who took her own life after she didn't receive the mental health follow-up she was supposed to get, despite falling under the DYP's care.
So this is a regrettable situation. And of course, we're trying to put means in place for this not to reoccur. But I have to say that there are some issues of intensity of services.
The DYP's testimony concluded that in order to make sure Inuit don't fall through the cracks, more funding is needed, not only for themselves, but for other social services and housing in Nunavik.
We must attack this problem of taking the children away.
Hearings will continue in Kuujjuaq until Friday, November 23rd. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Kuujjuaq, Quebec.
It's time for a quick break, and then we'll tackle the controversial Indigenous rights framework.
But first, here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, -9 for Halifax, -11 in snow in Fredericton. Also, -11 for Happy Valley Goose Bay, a rain-snow mix, and -8 for Nain. Sunny across much of Quebec, -13 in Chibougamau, -9 in Montreal. -7 for Peterborough, -6 for Toronto, -11 in North Bay. Snow and -4 in Sioux Lookout, 13 below for Kapuskasing and Timmins. -6 in Puckatawagan, 3 below for Norway House and God's Lake. -1 in Winnipeg, Princess Harbor and Barons River, 3 above in Dauphin. +4 for Saskatoon, Regina and Estevan, 6 above in Swift Current. -6 in Uranium City, +3 in Meadow Lake.
Welcome back. Recognition and implementation of Indigenous rights framework is getting a lot of media attention right now. First Nations people across Canada continue to strive for full recognition and implementation of their nationhood through self-government. Coming up on November 27th to 29th, a First Nations Self-Government Summit is being held in Halifax to look at strategies towards moving towards self-governance. Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief Morley Gugu joined me earlier. So what are some concerns that you have with the framework as it was introduced? As Carolyn Bennett was talking to AFN, what were some of the concerns that you have?
I'm not really having many concerns. We're focused here still in the Atlantic of what should our Mi'kmaq government look like. You know, we're in the stages of trying to determine that, and it's so important for us to really figure that out first before all the other things that are being discussed at the national level. And everybody has a lot of points of view, and that's fine. But at our pace, our Mi'kmaq territory, we want to be able to decide what our self-government is going to look like now.
Yeah. So, and you have a First Nations Government Summit coming up here on November 27th to 29th. Tell us a little bit about what that is. You're going to be a speaker at that, I understand.
Yes. Actually, one of the most important parts of this summit is to try to bring this kind of dialogue and different various expertise from across the country. I know we have an opportunity at the national level to talk about a lot of issues collectively, but we have 58 different Indigenous tribes across the country, and we're all going to have different deal breakers. We all operating on different goals and visions, and it's important that we here as Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet in our territory have a more engaging dialogue with our council members as well. You know, we can't forget that council members are going to be a very big part of us moving forward towards self-government. So having a kind of more a local point and discussion with engaging all our chief and councillors and showing them different self-government agreements across the country, I think is going to be beneficial for all of our people here. It's great when we go nationally, but it's mostly of our chiefs that get to go, and there's not that big space for really to have an open dialogue because there's so many things on the agenda. So our self-government summit here is just going to be talking about self-government and what should it look like.
So this is going to be, I mean, I take it that you're saying that before we can worry about the national relationship, we've got to figure out the local and regional things first, and then you can worry about what happens nationally. But how do you get people engaged? I mean, this is it's a big beast of a topic for most people to just get their head around and to get interested in. How are you guys doing? It's an uphill battle. How are you guys rolling the ball uphill?
Well, I think we have a great lineup of speakers. We have the national chiefs coming to to discuss what's his vision of self-government. We also have three former national chiefs, Ovid Murkety, Matthew Kunkam, and George Erasmus, going to be sharing in a panel discussion of what, as former national chiefs, would they see the opportunities of self-government is. There's so many different points of view people think what self-government is, but if we're going to organize ourselves to have jurisdiction on our own laws and making sure that we're sharing our own source revenue properly, and we're not limited on the reserve. If we're here on unceded Mi'kmaq territory, why do taxation issues only limit us on reserve? I should have a tax-free right, or anybody have a tax-free right to go work anywhere they want in Mi'kmaq territory. If not, don't come in here as politicians and say, oh, I'm so glad to be here on unceded Mi'kmaq territory, but all our rights are only applying on the reserve. That's not really cool. And so if we're going to look at self-government, we got to really look at it from a different point of view, in our view, rather than just agreements or wide range of topics that nationally there's so many different points of view, as I was saying.
Well, I would love to be at this summit, because it sounds like this is something I'd like to be a fly on the wall to listen to. I'm going to check back with you after the summit just to see how it went and what's next.
Yeah, and again, I'm really glad to have the opportunity with Regional Chief Augustine just to bring this amazing group of speakers to our territory and have our chief and councils to hear all the different options for us to move forward on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
We'll be in touch.
All right.
The Liberal government recently announced that they are pressing pause on the proposed Indigenous rights framework. But what exactly it is and what does it mean for Indigenous communities? Earlier today, In Focus tried to navigate through the jargon to get a better understanding.
The basic premise of what you need to understand is that since Canada's Confederation, Canada has sought to control, extinguish, exterminate rights of Indigenous peoples, which they have recognized as a part of the Royal Proclamation of 1763 and moving forward. And ever since that position, the government has tried to fit within their legal boundaries and frameworks to recognize Indigenous nations in sort of a limited way, giving us things like title or recognizing us title, and then eventually exterminate all the way going to the culmination of the 1969 white paper, which says we have no more rights, we're extinguished, we're erased, which we resisted fiercely.
This framework is a colonial process. I'm not surprised that 80-some% of the people that were in your poll didn't understand what the framework is about, because the Trudeau government's been operating by bypassing our people and misleading them for the past 3 years. It's been a top-down approach using the national Indigenous organizations rather than bottom-up, talking to the rights holders, the people in the communities and nations.
A piece of Inuit art has fetched an all-time record price at auction.
That story and more coming up after the break, but first, here's the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast. Picking back up in northern Alberta, +1 for Grand Prairie, 0 in Peace River, +11 for Medicine Hat, 9 above and sunny for Lethbridge and Calgary, 10 above for Victoria and Vancouver, +6 in Bella Coola, +3 for Smithers and Prince George, +8 in Sandspit and Prince Rupert, -9 in Dawson and Beaver Creek, -14 with snow for Rock River. In the NWT, 10 below and snow for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, -12 in Yellowknife. 24 below for Sax Harbor, -17 and snow in Colville Lake, -21 for Paulatuck, -21 for Baker Lake as well, 36 below in Cambridge Bay, -16 for Pangertung, -32 in Talio.
This next story is about a young girl with big dreams to become a famous hockey player. And as APTN's Tina House explains, she's well on her way to making that dream a reality.
Isabel Fortin, who's also known as Izzy, has been playing hockey since she was 7 years old, after attending a free event called Come Try Hockey. She was hooked. and joined the Vancouver Angels Pee Wee girls team, starting out as a goalie and then eventually moving on to playing forward. She's now 11 years old and says playing hockey has changed her life.
I just wanted to join hockey because I just wanted to get stronger.
And as her mother Denise explains, getting stronger has been a priority ever since she suffered a terrible accident when she was almost 4 years old.
She fell head first into cement, and she was lucky enough that when she fell, her skull cracked open outwards instead of inwards. And ever since then, she lost movement to her right hand because of her fall.
And to play hockey, it takes a lot of sacrifices, including waking up every weekend at 6 a.m. to attend practices and games. The cost of playing hockey is also expensive, but her family has devised ways to raise the money.
She does bottle drives. She collects where we live right now, our co-op brings in empties for Isabel to help keep her in hockey, and she just brings them in once a month. She does bake sales. She does a lot of fundraising on the island with her grandma and grandpa. It's a huge community that Isabel built up, and a lot of people do support her, and they can't wait to see Isabel thrive in more sports.
And for Izzy, her biggest mentors are Cassidy Campbell-Pascal and Jordan Tutu, who Izzy happened to see play while in Vancouver. She Instagrammed this picture of her wearing one of his jerseys while she was in Prague attending an international hockey camp last summer. Tutu responded on Twitter.
He followed my mom and my Twitter account, and he retweeted my stuff.
And her star is on the rise after winning the Grindstone Award for her fundraising efforts to keep herself in hockey. And in early November, she won the 2018 Premier's Award for Indigenous Youth Excellence in Sports, making her the youngest recipient.
And this year I can really see her game has moved to another level in terms of her skating ability and her puck handling and her passing and her shooting. So I think it's really her drive and her will.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
An iconic piece of Inuit art has set a new record as the highest priced print to ever be sold in Canada. Enchanted Owl by Knujuak Ashevik was printed in 1960. Only 50 were made. Last night, one of those 50 prints sold in auction for $216,000, setting a new record for a Canadian print. Jimmy Manning traveled the world with Ashevik through his work at the Cape Dorset Printmaking Co-op. We asked Manning what would Ashevik herself have felt about all the fuss over an expensive owl.
I asked her one time, and then she said, well, as an artist for me, I always wanted to make something beautiful for those people down south for their homes.
That's something else, $216,000.
Yeah. I wish she was alive to enjoy that $216,000 herself.
Makes me wonder what TV's jackets, the bid's at on TV's jacket right now.
Right. Yes.
That's all the time we have for APTN National News for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. If you missed today's APTN in Focus on Indigenous Rights and Recognition Framework, you can watch the rerun tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time here on APTN. Have a great night.